Welcome to the Journal of Biophilic Design podcast. Thanks for joining us on the Journal of Biophilic Design today. We are joined by Tom Dolan, who wrote an amazing article in issue 12 of the Journal of Biophilic Design, giving a systemic perspective on the climate emergency, national infrastructure, transformation and opportunities for biophilic design. He also spoke at our first Biophilic Design conference held at the Barbican in November 2024, which you can catch up on our website, journalofbiophilicdesign.com. Tom is a UCRIC Senior Research Fellow at UCL, and if you don't know what UCRIC is, and I didn't know before I came across Tom and his guys, and girls, of course. UCRIC is a UK collaboratorium for research on infrastructure in cities and aims to generate the knowledge needed to prioritise, de-risk and evidence government and industry investment in the UK's physical infrastructure systems. He's going to tell us a bit about what that actually really means in real life in a minute. But he holds an executive MBA from Cranfield University School of Management, an MSc in economics for natural resource and environmental management, and he also lectures at Cranfield University on MSc programs. So, Tom, first of all, before I waffle on anymore, many thanks for joining us today.
Pleasure. Absolute pleasure.
Lovely. Well, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, please? You know, what you do, who you work for, you know, kind of, and sort of what your job looks like till day to day, really.
So, the introduction covers a lot of that. So UCRIC is, as Vanessa mentioned, the UK Collaboratorium for Research into Infrastructure in Cities. So we are a collaborative group of 16 universities, each looking at infrastructure research from a systemic perspective with a specialist facility located on their campus. And if you want to find out more about that, it's ucric.com. But really, we've got kind of disparate research interests, but we're united by a common shared purpose. And I'd sum this up as really infrastructure systems can be transformed from drivers of societal and environmental challenges into kind of catalysts for their resolution. So we're looking at infrastructure as a resilience enhancing and net zero enabling and a sustainable system that can help to trigger prosperity that's equitably shared. And I think the movement around green infrastructure, biophilic design, climate positive design is got a big role to play in that. So improving the quality of outcomes enabled by infrastructure systems is really my vision, my aim for my research.
Yeah. And do you advise the government? Do you kind of get involved in like government kind of conversations?
Currently, I'm on a placement with the Ministry for Housing, Community and Local Government. So with them, I'm looking at recovery frameworks for flooding of infrastructure.
Okay.
And urban environments. So that's a watch this space. Hopefully there'll be something coming out from that. And with my colleague, Professor Liz Varga, we worked with the UN disaster risk reduction, UNDRR, and we came up with some resilient infrastructure principles, which are being adopted by various countries across the world. Just really around how you plan for and how you deliver infrastructure that's resilient to the kind of resilience challenges associated with global warming, associated with various other trends that we face. But yeah, open to more influencing government, really.
Yeah. And I presume biophilic design, and we were going to talk about it in a minute, but I presume biophilic design is included in that, in the resilience.
Absolutely. I see what we need for resilience is really it's a complex problem. We need a portfolio of solutions, drawing on the technological, drawing on the governance, drawing on the innovative, drawing on the natural world. We need it all, and innovation around biophilic design is absolutely invaluable and probably undervalued, fortunately, in our conscience of our decision makers.
Yeah, that's true. They can see a tree and they go, oh gosh, we just, this is going to, they always see as maintenance rather than actually, wow, what a wonderful life-giving, drought and water flood mitigation machine it could be seen as. So yeah,
we know how to value timber, value the trees from which that timber comes when they're not in a factory floor. So it's those multiple sources of value really interest me, because what would you have to build, what would you have to engineer to provide the equivalent level of services that tree is providing for local air quality, for greenhouse gas mitigation, for carbon sequestration, for biodiversity, for the well-being of the community it's situated in? How much engineering would you have to do to provide the equivalent of those services, and how much would that cost? Because is that not the true value of the tree?
Yeah, exactly. When you look at it like that, it's a no-brainer. You and I and a lot of our listeners are from that same page. But it's like, why are we not doing it in why are we not doing it in government? I was going to ask you before. I mean, with loads of things we're going to talk about, but what got you interested in sustainability and climate change? And wanting to make the planet better. Was there a moment, or what was the kind of what got you interested in it?
I was very lucky. I grew up in the beautiful county of Suffolk, in an age before kind of smartphones and tablets. So I spent much of my time outdoors, playing in the woods, at the beach, hunting for amber, and obsessing about football. I vividly remember watching stories about global warming on Tomorrow's World, probably at about the age of 11, and being outraged that the adults who I thought they knew what they were doing were harming our planet through the decisions we were making. So this really sparked a lifelong interest in environmental science, ecology, and other sciences. I studied natural sciences and environmental studies as an undergraduate, and then I was never really interested in the minutiae of the natural world, botany or ornithology or species ID. I'm useless at those things, but the bigger picture, the natural cycles, how things work, so I was absolutely fascinated by. But I let that drift, and then took some time to become a conservation volunteer in Ecuador, and I was really struck that the individually rational economic decisions that the poor people in the valleys where I was working took don't add up to environmentally responsible outcomes. They kind of initiate downward cycles of where do you get your income if your kids are unwell, you send them to hospital, or you need to pay for schooling. You can chop down a tree, or you can extract minerals, both of which upset the soil quality and led to erosion, making the water quality in the valleys of the poor people considerably undermined. So there's just this feeling that we were fighting against the economic flow, and that made me study economics for natural resource and environmental management. And since then, I haven't really looked back. I found a niche to champion infrastructure as part of the solution, and a way of being responsible in the way we develop.
Yeah. It's almost seeing something firsthand just jolts you, doesn't it? And it compels you when you're witnessing emotionally as well, when you're seeing how it's affecting people firsthand.
Absolutely. The projects I was on were the brainchilds of the kind of passion of a bloody-minded individual, a relatively wealthy individual in most cases, who wanted to make a difference, and they'd found a way of attracting international volunteers, but more importantly, the funding those international volunteers brought with them created jobs and awareness in the communities. And it just struck me that there's not enough international volunteers to go around, given how much land area we need to protect from our kind of base economic instincts. So really thought, well, we've got to get the sums to add up, and to date we haven't yet come even close to recognizing the full sources of value that we derive from the natural world, and that we take for granted or it provides for free at the point of consumption. So there's a lot of work to do, I think.
Yeah. And the more we can talk to each other as well, and share best practice and ideas and research, and just being able to articulate the problem I think is, you're halfway there, but then trying to get them to listen, I think.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, getting them to listen. We need to get the argument into economic terms, into financial terms,
Yeah.
but without distorting it in so doing. And
Yeah.
yeah, so it's a real policy challenge how we communicate.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I just want to just go back, sort of, really, I suppose, just a bit, sort of rewind. Really, you wrote that amazing article in issue 12 of the Journal of Biophilic Design, and you gave a brilliant perspective, on why, on how sort of biophilic design can be part of this, for like national infrastructure, climate emergency, and transformation. And obviously, you spoke at the conference as well, the Biophilic Design conference in November last year. But I mean, this is a massive, massive question, and we all have our opinions on this. But can you tell us how the climate emergency, and how you phrase it, is this wicked problem of problems? Can you sort of frame that for us, please?
Absolutely, I'd be delighted to do so. So, yeah, when I say it's a wicked problem of problems, I'm emphasising that it's multifaceted. We've set our hearts on getting towards net zero, and that's the Paris Agreement was a tremendous achievement. So the Paris Agreement to reach net zero by 2050, but we're not on track, and even if we did achieve net zero by 2050, we're still locked into at least 1.5 degrees of climate change, and the disruptive impacts of that global warming we need to be resilient to those. So that's a second branch of this wicked problem. And the third branch is we need to manage our societies, our infrastructure systems, our economies in a sustainable way, so that we're not, through unsustainable actions, exacerbating challenges caused by the disruptive impacts of global warming. So the third tranche would be sustainability. So it's a wicked problem because it's not receptive to incremental approaches. It's not got a single technical cause. So it doesn't have a single technical solution. There's no magic bullet. It is very much an emergent problem, not from any one part of this infrastructure system or the societal system. It is coming from deeper than that, and it's emerging as a consequence of the interdependencies between the system components. So it's a problem like no other. It needs a transformative response. We need to start to change the systems from which the symptoms are emerging. So this is why I see the climate emergency as a wicked problem of problems, getting to net zero, ensuring resilience to whatever level of global warming we're impacted by, and not exacerbating the problem by ensuring that everything we do is as sustainable as it can be. So yeah, it's a fundamentally different type of problem, and it needs governance as much as it needs technical solutions. It needs societal discourse. It needs to be aligned with, well, these are qualities that we need our economic growth to possess. So we need to change our societal success metric. Essentially, GDP is very good for encouraging the transformation of various forms of capital into financial capital. Yeah. Is that really what we want to be doing? So yeah, there's a call for mindset change in there, as well as fit for purpose governance aligned with the new targets that we set ourselves. It's a wicked problem of problems, and we need to treat it as such.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've mentioned there societal discourse. Just like what we're doing now, we need to talk, we need to chat, we need to speak to each other in society. We need to have this. We need to raise the problem. We need to keep talking about it, bring it to the forefront. And obviously, governance is a massive thing. The whole GDP and the sort of the way we measure economic value is shot. I think we need to change that, or we need to add something to it, or something. And I think there is a movement to that. Obviously, the donut economics is one of those, and I wanted to ask you a little bit about that, because I know you mentioned the donut economy. Just as an aside, I love the fact that Bhutan measures gross national happiness. I mean, what a way to, they can do that because they're a kingdom and they can do what they want, really. Do you know what I mean? They're not governed by, I suppose, other challenges or things or history and I don't know, I was going to say bigotry. That's probably a massive word, which I probably might reel in a bit. But can you explain maybe first of all what the donut economy is, please, and sort of what it looks like?
Okay, yeah, it comes from the work of Kate Raworth in Oxford, and in her book Donut Economics, what's it called? Subtitle: 7 Ways to Think Like a 21st Century Economist. She critiques conventional economic thinking, contrasting 7 ways that the current economist thinks with alternatives from the donut economics perspective. So essentially, her thesis is that we need to create economies and societies that allow us to live above a certain social foundation, and she specifies 12 social foundations around water, food, health, education, income and work, peace, political voice, social equity, gender equality, housing, networks, and energy. So she says that we need to aspire to provide for everybody a minimum standard of those, so a social foundation. And we need to do that in such a way that we don't burst through the ecological ceilings which constrain our activity on the planet. So ecological ceilings of ocean acidification, chemical pollution, nitrogen and phosphorus loading to our soils, freshwater withdrawal, conversion of land from one form into others, biodiversity loss, air pollution, and ozone layer depletion, and then the changing climate as well. So she's in the donut model. It's an American kind of style donut, not a jam donut, but it's a hollow center. So it's got the 2 rings, the social foundations in the middle, and the ecological ceilings on the outside. And her thesis is that we need to live in a just and safe space for humanity. And I really feel that infrastructure systems are part of the answer, how we get there. We need donut infrastructure. And my reason for really coming to it in the article you mentioned is, so I've been looking at net zero, I've been looking at resilience, I've been looking at the climate emergencies, this wicked problem of problems. And I think the surefire way to catalyze the rate of transformation that we need is to look more broadly at it. If we just look at net zero, then we will get some perverse outcomes. If we just look at resilience, then we will neglect other aspects. So we need to look at them all in the holistically. And this framework provides a particularly striking way of representing that, and it's rooted in a very strong critique of economic conventions as they stand. So yeah, it's a brilliant model from my perspective. It needs to be operationalized to a greater degree, and I think, though I don't have enough knowledge of this, I think they're doing that very much in Amsterdam. They're trying to see what it looks like to be a donut city. But yeah, I need to read further on that, and I'd recommend the book in a heartbeat. It's a really good read, and it's also got a section on how we need to get savvy with systems. So it showcases the work of Donella Meadows, whose book Thinking in Systems has really inspired me, and I think has great insights into how we achieve the type of transformational change we need to achieve for tackling a wicked problem.
Amazing, thank you. Thanks for just brilliant explanation. Best explanation I've heard of her book and the principles of it. And it is such a simple way of doing it. It's visually clever as well, isn't it? The image that she uses, this donut thing, it's just like with the 12 things around the edge, 12 things around the middle, and then I can't remember how many it is. Yeah, same, I think, isn't it? 12 around the edge for the environment. And then just keeping us within the donut is like the sweet spot, isn't it, really? Excuse the donut pun. But then, obviously when we're pushing the boundaries, as it were, of, the negative impacts on society or planet, then they sort of poke out the side of the donut, don't they? So they make it a spiky donut. So, it's such a brilliant way. And I totally agree with you. I think the book is amazing and people should read it, most definitely. Can you explain how you think biophilic design can help make our critical national infrastructure more resilient, obviously mitigating climate change and, and even, regenerating urban spaces. Can you sort of give us a bit of an idea on your thoughts on that, please?
Absolutely. I may use green infrastructure and biophilic design slightly interchangeably, because I think the way in which we engineer our infrastructure is very grey. It's very ingenious, but it's of its time. It was in a context of abundant, cheap energy, where we didn't need to pay for the emissions associated with it. Polluting was seen largely as an acceptable externality for which the polluter need not pay, and that's become deeply embedded in everything we do. So we need to start to challenge that, and in challenging that, we realise that nature-based solutions, green infrastructure, biophilic design, climate positive thinking, that there's ways of doing things with the natural world rather than against the natural world. And if you start to value the multiple streams of benefit that a biophilic design intervention can bring, from well-being to better local air quality, to reduce global warming, to better water quality, to better learning outcomes, what have you. If a biophilic design intervention in a household or in a community or in a school has these multiple positive synergistic impacts, and it's in communicating those and in showcasing those that I think we can have a real impact. Also, at the city level, there's a concept around sponge cities. So it's if we're facing increased flood risk as a result of global warming, we can use biophilic design, we can use sustainable urban drainage, we can use green infrastructure, we can use blue infrastructure to capture the water, slow its movement through the urban landscape, through built environment, through cityscapes. Because at present, a lot of our systems are designed to get the water. It flows across the landscape through points of least resistance down into the rivers, and our focus is getting it there rapidly so that it doesn't accumulate anywhere else. But we need to start to think more biophilically. We need to retain it, slow its movement with diffuse interventions across the landscape, so that whilst the water ultimately makes it to the rivers, it doesn't make it there in a flurry. It doesn't make it there too much water in the wrong place at the wrong time, and it gets retained where it's needed within the catchment as well. And so it can have a lot of positive effects. So yeah, as a application of biophilic design to the cityscape, I think flood defense, flood management, water movement is a massive one. But I also think local air quality and air quality in buildings, biophilic design can play a real massive role with a kind of internal planting and other interventions for better airflow and better heat control. Roof gardens as well, I think, perhaps provide insulation as well as providing space for nature. So there's lots of ways in which biophilic design can start to integrate into our mainstream thinking about how we provide housing, how we provide infrastructure solutions, and how we think about the purpose of those more holistically, so that when we're accounting for the investment in infrastructure, we look at the multiple value streams that it's generating, not just the ones that we can readily capture using our conventional thinking.
Yeah. And this is the whole reason of getting you on, actually, is because, for me, if you're a designer or a landscape architect or a facility manager, or you're running an NHS unit, or you're running a school, you're a teacher, anything, you're a pupil, if you've got an opportunity to specify biophilic design, I think, sometimes, not sometimes, a lot of the time, maybe, that when people say, oh, we want some green infrastructure in this space, we want some trees, we want some rewilding, it can be like poo-pooed, or like I said, it's almost like it's a nice to have rather than essential to have. And I think, and this is why you're here, really, Tom, is because for me, biophilic design is an essential key, if you want, to helping mitigate climate change and all this kind of stuff that you've been talking about. But it also, by having words and arguments and an understanding of how biophilic design can help, reverse climate change or help us reach net zero, which we're going to talk about in a minute. But how I think if you're a specifier or you're a designer, the more words we can have, the more evidence that we can have to try and get it over the line. Well, obviously, with one of the, the reason, initially biophilic design, when it came into mainstream, was about people health, mental health, the environmental psychology point of view. But I think this is such a bigger picture for me. Biophilic design, I think if we design cities, and every time we specify inside a building and outside a building, if we think with the biophilia hypothesis, is it going to enhance life and living systems? Then yes, that's the right thing to do. Is it going to damage life and living systems? Well, then don't do it. That's it. That should be as simple as that, really. It should be as simple as that. So yeah, I kind of, for me, I think, so bless you thanks for coming on, Tom, and explaining this stuff. And I'm sure there's probably other people like myself thinking, God, I wish I could keep your words in my head so that when I'm talking to someone, I can articulate this. So I might have to, I have to download a bit of your brain and,
I'd be honoured for that.
But obviously at COP28, if listeners may have missed it, it included this global stock take of where countries are in terms of reaching net zero. Obviously, we're clear we're missing it. There's too many. Anyway, we're missing it, and we have to have a more than net zero mindset in order to dramatically impact climate change. I mean, how do you see biophilic design impacting this? I mean, why do we need to have this more than net zero mindset? Maybe for a start.
Yeah. So the COP28, the finding beforehand from the study that was conducted, I can't remember who, but I think it was the UN FFC, FCCC. That we're not on track to meet our 2050 targets or the 2030 interim targets. And for me, I thought that finding would be greeted with much more outcry and panic. It deserves a bit of panic. It deserves a bit of attention. But it didn't seem. My perception was it didn't seem to be causing the level of urgency amongst politicians that it should be. So I was very disheartened by that. But within that, at that event, I had the good fortune to attend virtually as an online observer with UCL. And I attended a session led by the American Society for Landscape Architects. One of the speakers, Pamela Conrad, spoke particularly about the role in the States that landscape architecture can play in getting biophilic interventions, getting green infrastructure interventions into the way projects are conceived and the way the project success is managed. So she had ways of quantifying the carbon dioxide emission, the greenhouse gas emissions associated with a particular project configuration, the resilience benefits associated with the particular project configuration, I think the health benefits as well, and kind of the payback over time. So I was really inspired by that and felt that, yeah, it's an example to us all that there are ways and means of demonstrating the value case of doing things differently, rethinking how we solve problems, integrating the biophilic, integrating the natural world into our solutions. So yeah, that was what was it called? I mentioned it in my article, I think, but it's it'll come back to me later. I'll mention the name of the tool that Pamela Conrad has created. So I think I've straightened your question, Vanessa.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, I mean, again, how do you see biophilic design helping address this more than net zero? I mean, you've touched on it really, I suppose, with the green infrastructure and things, but just to kind of like hammer it home, really.
So I mean, I would like to see, because we're trying to get to net zero, I'd like to see buildings that need artificial external sources of heating or cooling to be seen as failing buildings, and the solutions to be seen as a portfolio of things, but definitely including the biophilic, integration into roofs, integration into building interiors, integration into how we insulate our buildings.
Yeah.
There's lots of things that can be done, I believe.
Yeah.
And yeah, if we look at our buildings as not needing external heating and cooling, how do we achieve that aim? And perhaps that's a useful framing to make the value case for adding carefully designed internal design that takes the biophilic perspective on board and into the very structure of our fabric of our building structures.
Yeah.
Again, I feel I've strayed from your question.
No, that's you sort of there really. Also, I think the fact that internally we are also specifying like wood, more bio-based materials because it's better for us in so many ways. Obviously, we're going to be reducing VOCs. We're having that less carbon use. We're not using plastics, so the impact on the planet ultimately is less, just because of how we're specifying materials. Yeah, I mean, we're both on the same page really, and how that we're frustrated by how climate change mitigation and adaptation, all this and sort of reversal aim is being managed globally. How would you like to see it done differently?
Yeah, so I really feel that the Paris Agreement was a tremendous achievement to get consensus amongst that many nations on something so fundamental.
Yeah,
it's taken slightly too long, but they got there.
Yeah.
Now facing the Paris delivery challenge.
Yeah.
Actually making it happen, and I feel it's gone from being a problem for scientists and environmentalists to it being a problem for a specific type of politician, the financiers and the kind of economic managers of the political world, and to have the G20 and COP29 going on separate continents last year was very disheartening. The people that we needed in the room, COP29, the people who have the power to make things happen, chancellors of the Exchequer and the international equivalents, need to be in the room at COP, not at the G20 at the same time. It needs to be taken up a level, and I really don't see that happening to the extent that is needed. It needs to be integrated into everything we do. Every decision should have a net zero, it should have a resilience, it should have a sustainability dimension. GDP should be divided by greenhouse gas emissions or something, so that you have a metric that you can only maximize by that you can increase either by growing the economy or by reducing the emissions associated with that growth. We're just not seeing it as this profoundly wicked problem. We're persisting with incremental approaches, trying to transition our way out of it, and it's just not receptive to that. You wind up with ever increasing marginal costs, and you're destined to fail. Is my feeling. So yeah, we really need to communicate this idea of the wicked problem, the idea of a problem in need of transformation of systems. And as Donella Meadows would say, to transform a system, you've got your leverage points, the most powerful of which is to change mindsets. So there's a big battle there that we need to change mindsets from this kind of casual, deeply embedded net zero assumption that pollution is free at the point of pollution. Is something we'll tidy up when we're rich enough, kind of the Kuznets-Curve style theory. To no, you have to price it in. It has to be priced in. Polluters have to pay. But the challenge we face is, if we were to change that overnight, the economy would probably collapse, because it's based on fossil fuels provided at artificially subsidized prices, because we're not factoring in the pollution. we try to make renewable fuels and other sources of energy more competitive by subsidizing the renewable fuel and those other sources of energy. Whereas what we should be doing is leveling the playing field by actually getting the price of fossil fuel use to accurately represent the environmental impact. So we need to turn the debate on its head, and we need practical ways of allowing people to make the changes. So again, biophilic design comes into it, because anything we can do to sequester, anything we can do to reduce demand for energy and other fossil fuel derived products or projects is playing its part in the bigger portfolio of actions that we need to drive towards a successful response to the climate emergency. So yeah, definitely a big role for biophilic design. It can be bottom up, that as well as top down. So got lots of passionate people. I was inspired amazingly by the conference that you held, but we also need the higher levels. We need to get the governance right. We need to get the thinking right around the value of these things to the society that we want to create.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for saying that about the conference. And I think you're saying about, the two events going on at the same time, and you've got those people over here, and then there's like this disconnect. And my kind of bloody mindedness, if you want, then it's like you can't. For the conference had to have everybody there. You had to have people from healthcare and researchers and designers and landscape architects and ecologists and environmental psychologists and everybody together, because we all learn from each other, and then we can accelerate the change. And I suppose being a bit bolshy and having it at the Barbican, put it on the map, and I got quite a few responses back from Parliament, but they didn't come, but I got a response. So I'm hoping next year, I'm hoping to build on that in some way. So watch this space. It's not for want of trying. So if anyone wants to get involved in helping campaign, then please get in touch. So I was going to ask you, obviously we spoke about, the frustrations and that, but is there an example of like best practice that you've seen that you can share with us? Maybe somewhere that people can go and often go and research or learn from, a city or a business that's getting it right. And then also maybe, to explain maybe why you think they're succeeding, and then what we can learn from this. It's kind of a big question, really, but
So the question around an example, again, it was the American Society of Landscape Architects. From what I've seen of their website, they've got a whole array of case studies of urban regeneration projects that support better drainage, greener cityscapes, greener urban environments. And again, Pamela commented the work was the Pathfinder tool, which is available for free download, and appears to be a very, very practical way of framing projects. So that's really one thing. I was inspired, as I say, by everything at the conference, all exemplars of what is possible even without the governance and policy frameworks being as encouraging as they could be. Just the creativity and the innovative spirit of everything I saw at the conference. Other examples, any local authority who dares to manage its highway verges in a more beneficial way, I would say, is a exemplar of good practice. I'd say this UCRIC, this is a plug. UCRIC has its Green Infrastructure Research Facility, which is kind of leading the way at looking at different aspects of green infrastructure and how that can be incorporated into the urban environment. And in terms of individuals, the Cloud Gardener, I don't know if you've come across him. He, during COVID lockdowns, turned his 18th floor balcony in Manchester into a cloud garden. He's become an influencer through YouTube, and he's communicated his work to the world. But he's also mainstreamed it in the horticultural circles through the Chelsea Flower Show, where he was communicated his learning. He's designed he's designed gardens for east, south, north, west facing balconies. So he's really, showing what can be done in a very small space. So I found that really inspirational as well. And also catchment managers, anybody who can reduce the need for energy-intensive water treatment facilities using environmental stewardship or green infrastructure or biophilic design type interventions at the landscape scale to prevent agricultural pollution entering water. I think that's also a good practice. And agriculture, regenerative farmers looking at biophilic approaches to soil management to restore soil health and productivity while simultaneously reducing dependence on chemical fertilizers to maintain soil productivity. I would build that into part of the biophilic landscape of solutions. And also large-scale solar farms get a bad press, but there are those that use their field simultaneously to host solar panels and manage to be highly productive in terms of crops and production. I don't know as much about that as I would like, but it's mentioned in Tom Heap's most recent book. So there seems to be growing work there. And another name is Janine Benyus, whose work on biomimicry kind of provides lots of inspiration about things that could be done differently, how we could draw on problem solving of the natural world to kind of solve some of our own problems or look at our own problems differently. So those would be my sources of inspiration, but it's lots of small sources, I think, all come together to make a bigger impact.
Fantastic, thank you. So I hope people go away and listen and watch and read and all those things that you've mentioned and the links and things. So obviously, if people are interested in of watching the Biophilic Design conference on Catch Up, they can go to the Journal of Biophilic Design journalofbiophilicdesign.com website and go to the Biophilic Design conference tab, and they can watch the 2024 Biophilic Design conference on Catch Up. And of course, we're going to be having another conference this year in 2025, again in November. Venue to be decided, or to be announced, rather, I should say, which is going to be exciting, and it's going to be bigger and better than last year. I think it will raise some eyebrows. Let's put it that way. So, Tom, before I ask you the very final magic question, is there anything else that you would like to add?
I'd just like to echo, I really recommend looking at the material from last year's conference. Lots of professional people with practical insights actually doing it. I felt a lot of what I've said is quite theoretical, is quite conceptual. The majority of what I saw at the conference was actually getting stuck in and being ingenious on the ground, and really much of it seems scalable. So I'd definitely recommend dipping into that content. Anybody who's been interested in anything we've said in this conversation.
Lovely, thanks. Thank you for that plug, Tom. I thought it was pretty good as well. Actually, I did enjoy it myself. So, and thanks to everybody who spoke at the conference as well, because they're obviously making a difference as well, and it's lovely to be part of that big family, as it were. So final question, Tom, that I ask everybody who comes onto the podcast: if you could paint the world with a magic brush of biophilia, what would it look like?
Okay, now this is a great question. I'm an optimist, and I believe that your magic brush need not be too far away. There's a lot of visionary work going on, and we can continue to demonstrate what's possible and hopefully inspire policymakers to create those policy and governance frameworks that recognise the value of biophilic design principles and other kind of nature-based interventions. But my vision is for a world in which green infrastructure is widely deployed to manage the movement of water through our cityscapes, improving our water quality, reducing our flood risk, improving local air quality, mitigating urban heat island effects, and all serving as a preventative medicine and facilitating better physical and mental health outcomes. My vision is for buildings that are dependent upon an external power source for heating or cooling being considered failing buildings and targeted for biophilically inspired whole of property resource efficiency refurbishments. Biophilic design innovations being incorporated into building management systems to provide heating, cooling, humidity management, air quality enhancement services, as well as aesthetic benefits. And I would love to see all public buildings, particularly schools and hospitals, become exemplars of how the integration of biophilic design principles into the interior of a building and the fabric of that building can facilitate improved building performance, save money, enhance health, and facilitate improved learning outcomes for users. I think there's a massive opportunity for the public sector to be, and public procurement to become exemplars of what is possible, and to start to drive the kind of mindset change around how we manage, how we develop, how we build our urban systems, our infrastructure systems, and our buildings and our landscapes. So can I ask what your vision is for your biophilic magic brush?
Oh no, thank you for asking. I normally end on your voice. So for me, well, I echo what you say. It would be full of life in all senses of the word. It would be uplifting and beautiful, full of birds, animals, insects. I remember when I was a kid seeing insects, just sitting on the floor and looking at, just being fascinated by little bugs and slugs and worms. And, it makes me it was heartbreaking that that's all been depleted through use of pesticides and all the other stuff. And light, of course, as well, bad use of lighting, which is killing off the insects and the bats as well. I've noticed the bats are reduced here as well, sort of this year, which is a bit scary. But it'd be full of trees and plants, and there'll be cool and pathways and curved pathways, which will encourage us to walk down the street, and there'll be community spaces and places like little seats for people to sit and enjoy birdsong and little bees that go past us, and it'll just be full of life. And when it's raining, there'll be places to go under cover, because there'll be trees. It won't be too hot because there'll be trees. The air will be better because there'll be trees. And also, if we're rewilding places and planting indigenously, we're going to have all this beautiful colour and shapes and fractals that we know is so good from us from a psychology point of view. And then as we look up, the buildings will be ideally made of wood or hemp, or just organic materials and curves and just things that just make us that are so inherently right for our brains, and for our hearts and our minds, and we'll just be flourishing in every sense of the word. Life on this planet would flourish.
It's a great vision. How we get it to add up in the world of the accountant, I think, is a profound challenge, but the value of all of those things is so high that surely it can happen.
Thank you for listening to the Journal of Biophilic Design podcast.